Welcome to Permission to Thrive. I'm your host, Suzi Lula. As a spiritual therapist for over 20 years, I have the honor and privilege of ushering women and mothers just like you on a journey from simply surviving to powerfully thriving. I also have the honor of raising our son, Will, who is now a young adult, with my longtime partner, Jamie, so I'm right there on the journey with you. Consider this your personal sanctuary, your space to meet your heart, embrace your messy, and come home to your most authentic, extraordinary self. My hope is that you leave resourced and inspired because you are here to shine. Welcome to Permission to Thrive. Hi, and welcome everyone. I'm so excited about this episode. This episode is on healing while in relationships, healing while parenting. So whether you are a parent or reparenting yourself, we are all in relationships all of the time. And healing while in relationship is the most powerful and liberating practice we can embark upon. And I can't wait for you to meet my esteemed guest today, Lelia Schott. Lelia is a therapeutic parent coach, a neuro-emotional practitioner, and the founder of the online advocacy group, Synergy Parenting. She's a mom to 4 adult children and 2 younger kids. Lelia finds deep fulfillment in working with people from all over the world. She and I are so aligned in our teachings and healing modalities that I am certain that you are going to have so many takeaways. In this episode, Lelia and I talk about how to move from survival mode to true thriving mode, how to regulate our nervous system when we are dysregulated, how to connect with inner safety and self-compassion. Lelia shares the 3 N's: notice, name, and nurture. She also shares love, learning to listen, observe, validate, and empathize, and how it's normal to be messy in our process of the deep connection and intimacy that we are all craving with each other. So sit back. This is your sacred time to restore, to renew, and to receive. I know that you are truly going to enjoy Lelia. Enjoy, everyone. So welcome everyone. I know that I have formally introduced you to Lelia, but I'd like to just personally say how excited I am for all of you to meet Lelia. Lelia is a friend and really an esteemed colleague. I follow you on social media. I've watched you on so many different summits, and I'm always on the edge of my chair when you're sharing, when I'm reading. I'm always shouting out, yes, with everything that I read or hear that you say. So I just feel so very aligned with your teachings, and I just can't wait for everyone to experience you, your teachings, your healing modalities. And today we're talking about healing while simultaneously being in relationships. We may specifically be talking about healing while parenting. However, whether you are a parent or not, this episode is relevant because we're all in relationships all of the time. And so if you are interested in thriving, if you're interested in healing and transforming while in relationships, then this episode is for you. So welcome, Lelia.
Thank you. Suzi, it's so good to be here with you. I'm always drawn to listening to you because of your energy and your warmth and your sincerity. So thank you.
Well, I feel the same way. So first of all, I'd like to just jump in and ask you, this podcast is called Permission to Thrive. What is your definition of thriving, and anything that you would like to share about your own journey where your relationship with thriving is concerned?
I like that question. It's one that I've been trying to discover more about, specifically the last decade or so,
Mm.
and recognizing that I did spend a large percentage of my life just surviving. And, I would hear that, the difference between surviving and thriving, but I don't think I really got it until I learned more about the nervous system.
Mm.
So for me, thriving would be how I would see it is recognizing when I am in a survival response, when I am in like a fight or a flight or a freeze. I spend a lot of time there. And previously, I spent a lot of time fawning, appeasing when I didn't actually know. So recognizing when I'm there again and just offering myself compassion, this to me, I feel like is my journey to thriving. Just being compassionate towards myself when I am, I suppose, predicting or feeling like there's some unsafety, whether it's real or perceived, and noticing that and naming it for myself and just nurturing safety.
Mm.
And I feel like I'm thriving when I can get back to that place of safety a little bit quicker than I have previously.
Mm. What a brilliant answer. And so, for all of you listening, and for any of you who have even tiptoed into my work, I hope you can see already from the first question why I relate to you so much. So, what I think I'm hearing you say is that thriving for you, you're recognizing that you have been on a journey and you know what it's like to be simply surviving, which I can so relate to. And then I heard you say you recognize within yourself when you are in flight or freeze or fawning. So as you're hearing me and Lelia, I'm hoping everyone listening, can you relate? Can any of you relate to being on this journey of learning that distinction between when we are simply surviving, in freeze, in fawn? Maybe you're thinking of yourself right now. What are your go-to survival modes? And then what I think I heard you say that's just so beautiful is offering that compassion to yourself. Learning how to be gentle with yourself is one of the many healing modalities you use, but that self-compassion, the way of gentleness with yourself, is a way to calm your nervous system and move you from the surviving. You also mentioned the quality of safety. And I just can so relate and appreciate that you're bringing that quality of safety right in from the get-go, because isn't that it? When we are freezing or fawning or in survival mode, we're disconnected from that quality of safety. So I'm hoping that everybody who's listening can already start relating. I want you to use this as you hear us in conversation. Use this for where you find yourself in your own life. So, Lelia, then anything you would either like to add to that, or another question that comes to my mind is, why do you perceive in your work and your experience with parents and women and individuals that it's so challenging for us to give ourselves permission to lead a thriving life?
Wow. That's such an interesting subject because a lot of clients that I speak to talk about their culture. And I acknowledge that that obviously plays into it. But a lot of times I'm recognizing, oh, this is actually true for me and true for somebody on a different continent and a different continent. So I think there's a lot of conditioning around what I've personally noticed is how, as a woman, we need to give and sometimes maybe give for free, right? Give of ourselves and expect nothing in return. Be a good person, be a good human, just give, give, give. And complaining is seen as unattractive or ungrateful. So I'm just hearing a lot of really high expectations. The bar is so high. Nobody could possibly stay that way without abandoning themselves or denying themselves very basic human rights, right? And needs and feelings that are so human. So I think the permission is just acknowledging, for me, it's that it's human. There's nothing wrong with me. I'm not bad. I'm not ungrateful or selfish or any of those things, but that I'm just human and I've got feelings and needs and rights like anyone else. And I think that's a great place to start, giving ourselves permission by normalizing that we're not bad, that we're just human and that we're good we want maybe more for ourselves and for our children.
I'm very touched by what you're saying. So, again, for you listening, perhaps you can relate to any of these things that Lelia has offered us. Perhaps you have been brought up to feel like, oh, I can't ask for that much. That's too much. That's selfish. We've been taught to take care of everyone else first and put ourselves last on the list, if we even make it to the list at all. Or one of the things I learned, I don't know if you can relate to this, but certainly I've learned the difference of putting everyone else first to my own detriment. I'm putting someone else first and I'm not even on the radar of caring for my own self. So what I think I'm hearing you say is we're learning to normalize that, yes, we may have been taught these things, but we have innate rights, as you're saying, and innate needs. And what you're saying is to normalize that it is understandable for us to want to be thriving, to want to experience that inspired energy and that vitality and radiance, and to normalize that we all have these needs and rights. It is part of our innate self to be here and to blossom and grow and thrive. So appreciating very much what you're saying.
Right? And how often our feeling, I think, from what I've noticed, can be such a normal feeling, but we might create stories about what that means about us or the other person if we have in this very normal feeling. Oh my gosh, I'm discovering for me when I feel angry, what comes up immediately is shame. And the shame just shuts it down. Like, you're not a good person that you're angry, which leads me to just stay in that survival state, right? Where I'm just like fawning. So I'm starting to recognize how that's quite sneaky. I can see it in my clients maybe more easily, or my children, or my loved one, but I need somebody else to help me, to guide me, to show me where it is in my life, right? Because it's sort of hidden from me sometimes.
I love that so much. That quality of shaming can be so sneaky. I could be feeling so good in one moment and it's so sneaky. Shame just comes up upon us and sometimes washes over us. And I think it's one of the reasons I'm loving doing this podcast, because as you're saying, sometimes it's so much easier to see it in another than experience it in ourselves. And so as everyone is listening, that's one of the benefits of hearing our conversation. It might spark or awaken a way that you may be experiencing shame in your life. And then, of course, that journey that you're speaking of about how to become aware that we're even feeling the shame that can come upon us in such a sneaky way, and then recognize, oh, I'm in survival, I'm fawning, or I'm fleeing, or I'm frozen, and then move ourselves back to what you were sharing earlier, that quality of safety. So this really brings me to another question. I would just love to hear from you on the healing modalities that you work with, and what do you see most in the clients and the parents you work with? You know, the heart of what we're speaking about today is healing while parenting, healing while being in relationships. So I'd love for you to just give us an overview of your philosophy, your teachings, your healings, what you see the most of, anywhere you want to go with that.
Thank you for asking that, because I do feel like parenting, whether it's reparenting yourself,
Mhm.
so I suppose internal family systems, I love that. And I also love working with the inner child, specifically people that are parents or non parents. I just love that. Just noticing how often behavior that I'm not proud of, whereas before, again, that shame would come up in me. Now it's so much easier to swap out that shame with self compassion when I can make sense of it, like acknowledge, oh, wow, well, this must have reminded a younger part of me of a time when I experienced rejection. So no wonder I reacted that way. And the more I've practiced this, what I've found is the less my first reaction is to go in with fight or flight or freeze or fawn. And my second response, which still sometimes it's the second one that I prefer, I still sometimes react first. My body just is so much faster. And then the second response is from my heart. And I'm able to say, like, whoa, I'm really sorry. And this comes up, I think, the most for me with my children. I feel like they just know. I'm sure I don't know if it's the same for you, Susie, if it's the same for most people, but my kids tend to push on those old wounds the most. And this is such a wonderful opportunity for us to slow down and recognize that this isn't about my child's behavior. It's not about them, but it's about my previous experiences or my future expectations or my current. I think that can be very helpful for parents. So previously, I would have noticed a moment when I was dysregulated and triggered as just a parenting flaw. Like, oh my gosh, I'm just not regulated enough. I just don't know how to do this. I'm not good enough, spiraling into that. Whereas now I can be more compassionate and also more curious. Like, oh gosh, I'm having a moment here. What is this really about?
So many gems here. So many gems here. So first of all, I love that you moved into your own personal experience with your own children. So all listeners, whether you are a parent yourself or, as you were saying, reparenting yourself, we're all in relationships. So whether it's your spouse, your partner, your friend, your coworker, your boss, your child, in our cases, well, my husband and my child, in my case, what you're saying is that these individuals can trigger these old wounds in us. And what I think I'm hearing you say that's so relevant and certainly has been a big transformative piece for me is you said, whereas before, when you got triggered, you would see that as your own personal flaw. And you would say, oh, something's wrong with me in this parenting moment. I know for me, for certain, in the past, I was like, I feel like a bad mom. I feel like a failure. I'm failing him. Something's wrong with me. And what I think I'm hearing you say is that now you're able to recognize, oh, this other individual is triggering something from my past, old hurts, old wounds that haven't been completed. And so I can hold it in a different context. It's not that something's wrong with me. It's something that needs to be healed in me. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Exactly. So previously I would have thought, oh, kids, they create triggers in me. They doing this to me. Whereas now I'm like, oh, they just revealing it. They just showing me. I just imagine them sometimes as people following me around with like little spotlights, and they just shining the light on all those dark places that need love, right? Because it's often fear. For me, it's fear. And I'm just recognizing sometimes I don't go there where, oh, I'm a bad parent. But if I am honest, there have been times when, especially with my more strong-willed children or integrity children or whatever we're going to label them, the ones that just keep pushing back, I would be like, there's something wrong with my child. So whether it was self-blame or blaming the child, that's what I feel I would often do when I was just surviving.
Okay, brilliant. Everyone listening, can you relate? Because absolutely, right? Either I'm going to inflict it upon myself and say, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Or of course, and sometimes even both. I'm like, well, if I could only control and manage my child, because certainly something must be wrong with his behavior. I mean, it's so obvious. If he would just clean his room, it would be so much better. It's so obvious. If he would just do his homework the first time. I mean, isn't it obvious to everyone that if he would just put down the iPad when asked? I mean, certainly it's him, right? So, oh my gosh, I think what you're saying are our learned behavior, it's learned reactivity. But when we get that anxious place inside and when we get that spotlight, as you're saying, okay, first of all, can we just go back to that? Can everybody relate? Do you often feel like the other individual, whether it's your child, your spouse, your boss, do you feel like your boss can just find the place inside of you and they're just putting the spotlight right there? Like, how did they possibly see this? So I'm hoping that everyone can relate. I certainly can. And then what you're saying is so true. The spotlight is on a place inside of us that's needing healing and processing. And we either place it upon ourselves, or certainly we see that the other person is the problem, right? I love your description. It's very accurate, at least to my life. So when you're working with individuals or yourself, because I love that you're talking about your own journey, share with us then what happens within you, what used to happen, what happens now.
Sure. So I think when I thought my job was to control, then it was just a disaster because I was either trying to control myself or control my children or control my spouse or my boss or whoever, right? And not always in the way that people may perceive control. Sometimes I think it could just be with maybe trying to fix everything. Like if I can just take away this problem for them, if I can just put myself in a position that wasn't helpful, right? Like trying to micromanage or compensate. Compensate was a big one for me. Whereas now I like practicing being more of an observer, like
Mm.
noticing what is this reminding me of? So that past experience, or is it like a future expectation that comes up for me a lot? Like that fear of, is my kid going to make it in the world? Are they going to treat other people like they treat their sibling for the rest of their lives? And just how my survival brain takes me to these places of really blowing things up. And so if I can notice that I'm exaggerating the context, and now I'm starting to practice connecting. So I'm connecting to that, like validating for myself. Oh, of course you're thinking of this. It makes sense because you care about this so much. And you really want your child, if we're talking about children rights, to be a loving, respectful human being. And right now, it doesn't look like they're going to be that. But that's because they're 9 or whatever, right? So just validating and making sense of. And I love practicing notice, name, nurture. And this practice is from, I guess I've taken it from all different people, if I'm honest, right? And combined it to noticing what's going on in my body. Like sometimes I just feel like even now, right? I'm a bit nervous to be here, to be talking to you and having, so I can feel the activation of my body, naming for myself, oh, it's fear. I care about this so much. I don't want to mess up. I care about other people that are on this journey. And naming that for myself already, I can feel like a release.
Mm.
And then just nurturing. So for me, I'm playing with some beads in my hand. I'm noticing to take deep breaths. Sometimes I like using self-touch, scanning a little bit, sometimes closing my eyes. And of course, all these things can be quirky. But I think if we see other human beings engaging in self-soothing practices, the funny thing is our nervous system is usually can notice that and we can just use it as co-regulation. It's okay if we're doing these things.
So I so relate to everything that you're saying. When I hear you, first of all, I just wish every person on planet Earth would get to hear you. I wish every person, because not only are you so equipped and adept at sharing so articulately, but you do it with such compassion in your voice. I'm so drawn. I feel so soothed just being in your presence. So you've said so many good things here, and I want to reflect some of them back to see if I'm on the right page here. Everyone listening, you might want to jot these down. What I think I heard you say were these 3 N's: notice, name, and nurture. Love the 3 N's. So if you all are listening, jot it down. Notice, name, and nurture. Brilliant. And when you were talking about the noticing, so I'll go through each one and see what I think I heard you say. When you were talking about the noticing, I think you asked these 2 really great questions that are great takeaways. I think I heard you ask, what is this reminding me of from my past? And what might I be projecting about the future? So I love that. I think what you're saying is notice when we're dysregulated, notice that. And then we can ask these 2 questions, because when we're dysregulated, we're not in the present. And so you gave these 2 really grounding questions. I'm sure there are many others, but these 2 are very grounding. What is this energy reminding me of from my past? It's a very compassionate question to ask yourself. And oh, how might I be projecting on the future? I can so relate to you when you're saying, oh my gosh, if my son doesn't learn to clean his room, is he going to really make it in life? Because then he's not going to be able to XYZ, and then he's not going to be able to XYZ. And so, we're projecting onto someone's future 30 years from now based on, a room that isn't clean in the moment, or my son has a hard time, putting down a video game. And so certainly he's not going to make it, in life. So I love these two questions. So those of you listening, you're hearing, what is this reminding me of the past? What might I be projecting onto the future? That's noticing. Then you're naming it, which is excellent, because when we start to name, oh, I see. Oh, this is what I'm doing. Oh, I'm in survival. Oh, my nervous system is. So you're naming what's happening. And then nurture, of course, I'm all about it. You said, oh, I see. And just the way you said it, those words, the way you said it, oh, I see. I have a phrase very similarly that I use, oh, it's so understandable that you would be projecting into the future. It's so understandable based on where I came from, of needing to keep and control my external environment so pristinely, that of course it's so understandable that if I see that he's okay with his environment that isn't so pristine and controlled and managed, that, oh, it's so understandable based on my past, my context, my wounding, how I was raised. Oh, it's so understandable. Then I'm going to go to that with this other person. And you mentioned the word self-soothing, and how just this energy can help us regulate our nervous system and co-regulate then with each other. So am I hearing you
Yes.
accurately? And
Right. Yeah, perfect. And what I also love is you can mix it up. You can find out what works for you, right? So if you practice these three N's or anything else, and you discover that there's something else that really is helpful. So for someone that I was working with, he goes to the nurturing after he's noticed, because he doesn't have access to naming the emotions just yet, or the needs, or whatever it is. Sometimes it's our emotions that we want to name. Other times it can be our needs or our values. I have a real value for teaching my child XYZ. Or so he does the noticing and the nurturing, and then he gets around to the naming when he's in a more regulated place. Whatever works for you.
excellent. I really love that there are these ends. There are probably many other questions. And what you're saying is that we can pick and choose. I can relate to your client because I am typically the one that goes to the nurture first. Oh, it's so understandable. That really assists me to regulate myself, because I'm very sensitive. I can find myself dysregulated often throughout the span of a day. And when I say it's so understandable, and you were mentioning earlier about your beads, fiddling with beads, and I share that with you. I have touchstones. I can touch my bracelet often. Often I just find a go-to. I place my hands on my heart, and I do it so often now that there's just something very soothing for me. It helps me take my awareness off of the external, if only he would. And there's something soothing for me about touching my body. You mentioned that earlier. And so what you're saying is that we can pick and choose, and we can use them in the order that works for us, different ways at different times. So I'm appreciating that. As we're in this conversation, I really want to open this up very much to you, what you see in your work with clients, your own individual life. Is anything else coming to mind that you want to share with us that you see often, or healing modalities that you use?
Thank you. I think for me, I've noticed, perhaps it's just the clients. I always trust that whoever needs my help will find me, and whoever can help me, I'll find them. So maybe it's just, but I am receiving many clients over the years who find their children's emotions challenging. And I don't think that's any surprise. If we didn't feel held in our emotions growing up, it makes sense that when our child is having big emotions, we're going to notice some sort of survival reactivity going on, right? And so I think if there's anyone listening now, if you don't have children, that's okay, because you will have somebody in your life who is going to have emotions and going to come to you with their emotions. And if you can notice what happens for you in your body, like, do you want to run away? Do you want to try and fix it and say something to kind of make them not feel that feeling? That's what I used to do a lot of. And I thought I was being so helpful. But I know now that that isn't always helpful. What people really need, and so if we're talking about our little people or our older people, everyone just wants to feel like they're normal, feeling whatever they're feeling. You can validate it. And another acronym that I love is the word love. The L is for listen. So if you can get really good at listening to yourself or to whoever's coming to you with emotions or feelings or needs or whatever, right? So often it will be in the story, and you can mine for feelings and needs they have in that story. So an example, I used to have a relative who was always complaining, but always, and I noticed that I wanted to not spend time with that relative that much until I started practicing just mining for feelings and needs in his story. And if I could validate that feeling or need back for him, then he stopped complaining about that subject, because that's all anyone really wants. And they're going to keep making up more story. And our little ones are often going to try and create in us whatever it is that they need validated. It's instinctive, it's not manipulative. So if they're feeling really anxious, they may come to us and whine or cry or pull on us and create that anxiety in us. And it's just such a very innate way to create, I suppose, support, a cry for help. Like, I'm feeling this way and I don't know how to help myself. So I'm just going to come to you again and again and again until you feel as frustrated as I do and you pay attention. So I'm recognizing that listening to understand. And I know that we see this all over the place, but it's still a challenge for me to listen to understand opposed to fix or reply, right? And then the O is to observe feelings and needs. And the V is to validate them. So that makes sense. That's understandable. I see. And we want to try and do it as clearly as possible, because our children can tell, specifically our children, but anyone can tell if it's just like rehearsed. But that's okay. It's probably going to feel a little bit rehearsed in the beginning, and that's fine. And the E is for empathize.
Mm.
I like to problem solve and do all the executive stuff after we've done that. So I know you know all of this, Suzi, but I feel like I can never get enough of just reminding myself that this is actually what we all need. It's kind of simple but hard to do.
Exactly. And yes, I'm sure that many listening have been on a path of personal growth and evolution, but I believe that we heal best when we heal together, and we heal best when we are the most relaxed. And so these conversations, they relax me because I feel, oh, I'm not alone. Lelia does this for her living, and you are a master, and you are experiencing some of the things I'm experiencing. So everyone listening is also hopefully saying, oh, Suzi Lula experiences this with her son. And I think, yes, we may quote know, and we may quote have heard this information. And I think that as we communicate it in a way that we can receive and integrate it into our bodies in a very relaxed way, those of you listening, you can literally leave this conversation transformed from how you arrived by allowing yourself to just take this in, receive. There's nothing to do, there's nothing to fix, just allow this to land. And our own wisdom of our bodies can help us integrate this. You're right. We're probably not saying anything new, but the way that someone can hear us can be very soothing. So I'm taking notes. Now I have my three N's and I have love. And what a beautiful acronym to share with all of us. Love. Who does not want to leave with this practice now of going to love often? I want to go to love as often as I can when I'm feeling dysregulated from that love. So what I think you're saying is love is about learning to listen. Love is about learning to observe. Love is about learning to validate. And love is about learning to empathize. And those are all such beautiful practices. We'll probably all be doing those as long as we're on earth.
Exactly. And practicing them on ourselves, this is work I feel that parents really benefit from, is whether you're self-parenting or whether you're parenting little humans, is the inner child in us also needs so much of that love. And noticing, like, for instance, how I'm discovering that when anger rises, I'm not necessarily regulating, but I'm actually just suppressing. And seeing that even after all the work I've done, oh my gosh, here's another thing that I still don't feel safe with, and that's okay. I haven't arrived. I probably won't arrive. I'm just going to keep working on all these things. And I love how our beautiful nervous systems only delivers it to us when we're ready. Because there was a stage when I was like, oh my gosh, like, how can I still have so many issues? Whereas now I'm like, I'm so grateful that I didn't receive all of them in one go, but I'm just learning about them as I go when I can manage them, when I have what I need. And sometimes that's a support system, which I think a lot of people are lacking.
Yeah, I love that you're saying that. It's one of the reasons that I felt called to do a podcast, is to be offering support, because if one of the things I hear from clients and students daily is, regardless of how immersed I am on my own journey, I still feel a void, and I'm seeking that support system, like-minded individuals. I mean, you're in South Africa and I feel so connected to you, and we're on different continents. And the individuals that I'm speaking with daily are telling me that they're hungry and starving for the depth of connection. And so this word support and community, I think now we're hungrier for it than ever. And so it brings me to just maybe one last question, a practical question that comes to me listening to you. How do you work with parents, or it could be any individual, it could be my spouse that is triggering something in me, specifically around parenting? Our children need us when they need us in the moment. So perhaps people listening may have the same question. How do you work with individuals on how to work with yourself and work with that child in the moment when it's all happening at one time?
It's really difficult. I think it's always going to be messy, especially when we have two dysregulated nervous systems. So whether it's, a spouse, or whether it's a child or another family member, right? Our siblings or whatever can still trigger us in our adult years, and we can behave just as we would when we were younger. Whatever it is, I just want to also acknowledge that I think it is harder when it's with a little toddler or a child that really needs us. And we can't say, oh, I feel so activated right now, I need to just take a moment and walk away, because that is going to create more dysregulation in that little human. So those years for me are kind of like a blur, especially with my older four. With my younger two, I feel like it had so much practice. I know very few people have the privilege of being able to practice on six little souls.
I'm bowing down to you very deeply right now.
I noticed that those years were so difficult because they were just difficult, and not necessarily because I was doing a lot wrong. But I like to remind parents that that's not helpful, right? To rather focus on what you were doing right in that moment and build on that. Yeah. Because when it's dysregulated, it's not that we're doing anything wrong. It's just that we feel overwhelmed and flooded. And so sometimes those moments look like a parent just falling down on the floor with their little one and just tolerating it for as long as you can. And then if you need to, putting them somewhere safe and phoning a friend, or drinking a glass of water, or splashing your face, or just, stretching, or whatever it is, until you feel safe enough to go back to that little human. And I think those years, for some parents, it can be that daily, just tolerating whatever it is it's feeling, what bringing up for you. And so we can feel, for me, it was certainly like this. I think I felt my feelings in my body in the same way that I possibly felt them when I was a child.
Mm,
It just felt so huge, like disappointment. I had a day planned with the children and I thought it was going to be so fun. And then everyone's just melting down, and I would just feel so disappointed that it would turn to anger and, oh, you also ungrateful. Whereas as we mature emotionally, so I feel less shame now admitting that I was emotionally mature as a young mother, and that it took me growing with my children in emotions. And that's okay. It's not ideal. It wasn't ideal. It was so hard, but I feel like the repair was the most powerful for my kids. Like to just say, oh, earlier on was tough. We were both so disappointed. And I'm sorry that I was irritable or whatever. I love you. And then it progressed to me noticing, oh, I actually can handle disappointments in my body now. And I can communicate that. Just having these tools, right? Nonviolent communication, if anyone's listening, you can research it. It's a game changer, but it takes a long time to practice. So sometimes it was reacting. I yelled again. Oh, I'm so sorry. And then using Pam Leo's 3 R's, like rewind, repair. I'm sorry, I yelled. Replay. What I meant to say was, it really hurts when it's Lego all over the floor and I stood on it. Can we please pick it up? That sort of thing. Until eventually you realize you're having fewer and fewer of those moments and more moments of saying what you feel and what you need, respectful way.
yeah, I'm so in alignment with everything you're saying. And I think the first thing that you said, you had earlier today used the word normalize. And I'm going to put it together with what you just said. The first thing you said was often it's messy. And I think this is a takeaway of all takeaways for people today, to please assist yourself to normalize that often it is messy, and that is okay. It's a challenge enough to work with our own nervous system, and it gets exacerbated when now we have two nervous systems that are each dysregulated. That can be messy. That can feel messy. And so what I think I'm hearing you say is, let's normalize that it can feel messy, especially with toddlers, because they are dysregulated often. They're learning how to be regulated on this planet, and they're learning. And so when we have two dysregulated beings, again, toddlers, bow down to all moms of toddlers right now, deep bow. And it could be a spouse who's dysregulated. It could be a teenager who is dysregulated, because I always think the teen years and the toddler years, very similar. But what you're saying is it's okay that it's messy. And the more that we can normalize and tolerate that messiness is often part of the process, and we're not trying to resist the messiness, it actually assists us to move through the messiness. You gave us all permission when you said, sometimes we can just lie down with our toddlers and tolerate it in the moment as much as we can. Those things to me are golden takeaways, because it allows me to be imperfect. It reminds me that no one is looking to me, especially our children, to be perfect. They're looking to me to help model to them that it's a part of the plan that we're all imperfect. They can be imperfect, and we will get through this. I love that you also use the word repair. I often tease that if I were ever to write a parenting book, it would be called Reparative Parenting, because to me, that's the gold at the end of the rainbow. When I can be imperfect and then come back to you and go, Lelia, I really look back at how I acted and I would really like a do-over. The way that I spoke to you or reacted to you, it didn't feel good in my body. So I know it couldn't have felt good in your body. So, can we just have a do-over? So these last things that you've been sharing with us, I hope everyone listening is feeling like these are also golden takeaways. Messiness, repairing, do-overs. I appreciate you including the messy, because I think for those of us on a personal growth path, we can unconsciously go from, oh, I'm really authentically seeking to evolve, and I unconsciously translate into, and then that needs to look perfect. No, not at all. We're all in this together. So I could not thank you enough for that last bit. And then I would just love to offer you, do you have any takeaways, any last words? Certainly, I'm going to make sure everyone knows where to find you. Anything that you want to share with everyone?
I would like to, just what came to mind when you were talking was how beautiful it is when we see our children practicing these things that we've been practicing, and specifically the moments where we thought, oh, I messed up. So when you were talking about restorative, reparative parenting, when you see your child or your partner for that matter, or anyone in your life, come to you and say the same things that you've been saying to them in a way to reconnect, and they're now saying it to you, it's just golden. When you can imagine your teenager coming to you and saying, you know, mom, when you were saying I didn't feel good in my body, I've had a child say that to me before. And I was like, they would never have learned that skill if I hadn't made mistakes. Not that I'm intentionally setting out to make mistakes, but I made them unintentionally. And now this beautiful human knows how to prepare and take responsibility for her mistakes. So I
Yeah.
just wanted to make that with parents, that often the moments that we think we wish we could just, I often used to think, I wish that I could just have that whole part of their life do over, recognizing that they learned a lot from the times when I messed up and I repaired and I took responsibility.
Yeah. So beautiful. I just knew intuitively that I was going to, love. I couldn't wait to have you on. And I think what I am hearing you say that brings this whole conversation full circle when we're talking about healing while parenting, healing while in relationships. I think what you're saying now is the healing comes from learning how to reconnect when we have felt disconnected, either internally and externally. These are practices, hopefully, that everyone is taking away to help us reconnect when we've been disconnected, because obviously what we all want is that deep connection. So I really thank you, Lelia. I know I've said this often to you, but I truly acknowledge the work that you're doing. I want every person on planet Earth to witness you, be connected to you. I have it certainly in the show notes, your social media and your website. But where can people find you for anyone who's wanting to connect with this beautiful, beautiful being?
Thank you, Suzi. You'll have my information there.
So all of us, let's go to Lelia's Instagram site, which is on the show notes, and connect. Because I know that having my soul care community, spiritual psychology community, it's a lifeline for me, a lifeline. And so we are all in this to ensure that we are surrounded by like-minded and like-hearted individuals, of which you are a shining one in my life. So thank you so much for being here. And please come back again soon. I would really love that. I so hope that you are leaving with some practical, tangible takeaways that you can begin to implement immediately into your day-to-day life. I wanted to leave you with a beautiful poem that Lelia had sent to me. I just think it really is reflective and speaks to the healing that we are all craving while parenting, while in relationships. And it goes like this. Be gentle with yourself. Be gentle with your children. Parenting can be tough. Being a child can be tough. We keep experiencing new things and need the practice to improve. You're doing the best you can. Your children are doing the best they can. We're never going to be perfect, but we can always practice being more gentle and connected to ourselves and one another. So this is very reflective of the conversation. I hope you take this nurturing energy with you. And as always, if you are taking takeaways, I would so appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe to Permission to Thrive so you'll always be notified about new episodes. I hope that you will keep in touch with me. Let me know which episodes are truly touching you. I want to create content that really speaks to you. And I hope that you will leave a 5-star review because it truly assists us to get the message out to more people on planet Earth that we are each and all here to thrive and to shine. Much love, everyone, and see you next week. Thank you so much for listening. If there was something in this conversation that spoke to you, we'd so appreciate it if you would take the time to subscribe, leave a 5-star review, and share this episode with women and mothers you know, because you are here to thrive. See you next time.